Welcome to another episode of Jamming with Jason. Hey, today I have my friend Jennifer Waters with me, and we're going to bring out the big dogs today. Ow, 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 ow. Right, okay. Not that great, but we're going to bring out, I'm sure we're going to end up talking about dogs, as well as a lot of other stuff, because Jennifer is one of those people that just really has an amazing story, and you will be able to see and learn from her and her life and be able to apply that into your life as well. And so the fact that you're listening to this right now means there is something that you need to hear in this episode. So stay tuned as we roll that episode now. All right, Jennifer. Hello, my friend from the frozen north.
Hello. I need to come visit you and soak up all that sunshine.
I know it's I'm down here in southern sunny California. You're up in northern Upper Peninsula, Michigan, so it's starting to get a little bit cold up there. And literally, it is going to be like the frozen tundra for you probably in a few weeks.
It is for months and months. It's going to be just snow every day.
Yeah, but I'm thankful to have you, to be talking with you, because again, you're one of those people that I've learned a lot from already, and that I know a lot of people are going to learn a lot more from as well. But your story especially, right? And so I think it's, because kind of joking about the frozen tundra, but you haven't always been up in the frozen tundra,
Right.
right?
Why do I live in the frozen tundra?
Why
Is
do
a
you
good
live in the frozen
good
tundra?
story.
And there's a whole story, right, for how you kind of got there as well. So maybe just give people kind of the thumbnail sketch of how you ended up there, and then let's kind of dig in about some of the lessons that you've learned, some of the lessons that you're still learning as well, as you've gone through these different phases of your life, really, for kind of the last 2, 3, 4 years, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for having me, by the way. It's so good to talk to you. We could talk about dogs for days, so I'm just going to warn you about that now. You're going to have to
And we're
cut me
gonna
off at
get
some
there.
point
We're
when we
gonna
do
get
start
there.
talking about dogs.
Yep.
But the dogs do have to do with, why I live in northernmost Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Some people probably have to look that up. There's an Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Most people don't even know that, but um, I have lived in Chicago. I've lived on the East Coast, most recently in Grand Rapids, Michigan for the last 16 years. And my life really hit a stopping point kind of when my son turned 18, my youngest son. I have two kids. Um, and something just dramatically shifted as soon as he turned 18. And it became clear that I didn't need to keep living life the same way that I'd always lived it, which was very much, in the rat race, kind of, in the, corporate climb, in the busyness. I did everything for my kids. I showed up for all the events. We were constantly busy. There was never any downtime. I never really had much time to myself. It was very much focused on the family and just keeping that moving. And it just was very, very busy. And as my son turned 18, and I realized that both my kids were now adults, they were responsible for themselves, something shifted, and it just became clear that it was time for a new life. And I actually clearly heard that in my mind. It's time for a new life. And what started to happen, this wasn't something that I logically thought of. This was signs that started happening, shifts that started happening, things that started falling into place for me. What started happening is that I became more and more directed toward nature. And it became very important to me. For that, all that busyness in my life, I had become very disconnected from nature. And what I started to realize was that nature was the place where I felt the best, where I could reconnect to myself finally after so many years of being somebody else's employee, being a mom, being a wife for most of that time, being a neighbor, being, a family member, I got to reconnect to myself and who I really was when I was in nature, when I got to slow down, when I got to, just feel the sun on my face and the wind on my skin. Um, so I kind of was given this crazy idea that what I really wanted was wild nature outside my door. Um, I really asked myself, I really sat down and asked myself, what is it that I truly want? If my life is shifting this dramatically now, where it's like this stopping point, um, where, before I was raising kids and now I'm not really, they're adults, what is it that I really want? And what came through was wild nature outside my door. And I started to look for a new place to live. And I really was drawn to the Keweenaw Peninsula of the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And I can't, like I said, it's not logical. It's a very different culture here. It's not as many resources. It's not a place where I grew up, and I had even not even visited it. But I kept being drawn to the land. And it was so strong that I couldn't not do it. I couldn't not make this move. And what happened is once I finally realized that I was being drawn to this land and that it was because I wanted wild nature outside my door and that I trusted whatever this call was, I trusted that I could at least try it out because nature had started to become so important to me and had helped me recenter so much. When that happened, when I finally just kind of surrendered to that, the perfect house fell into place. The perfect sale for my existing house fell into place. The perfect timing for the move fell into place. And I now live on Lake Superior in a tiny little house that has a view of the Keweenaw Bay with my dogs. And we have several acres to run around. And I have bald eagles around me all the time, turkeys, deer, acres of pine trees to walk through. I have 20 apple trees. I just counted them yesterday because I didn't know how many I had, but I went and I picked apples. And sometimes on the way to my mailbox, I pick raspberries and thimbleberries as snacks, like just foraging from the land and connecting with old growth pine trees and watching the eagles soar. And it is the most amazing thing that has ever happened to my life, but also it's the thing that I probably planned the least.
Hmm.
I allowed it to happen, and it became the truest, most wonderful thing that has ever happened in my life.
Well, and I want to go there because I've got lots of questions. Right. And I know more of your story just being your friend, as well. But I think it's what you're kind of describing, right? I mean, we all go through these different kind of inflection points in our life, if you want to call them, right? I mean,
Hmm.
something happened when your son turned 18 and you had a shift, right? It was an
Hmm.
inflection point in your life where, again, you had the choice to realize and go, hold it, my kids are adults now. And like you said, I've always been somebody's, wife or employer or mother or whatever. And that's where your life and the busyness of life had been focused, right? Because
Right.
you did well. I mean, you were doing
Hmm. Oh, I
what
killed it.
you
I
know
put everything into that. I put everything into it and left very little for myself.
well, and that's the thing, right? Because you left very little for yourself.
Hmm.
And so now at this inflection point, it's like, okay, well, something needs to change, right? And you heard it's time for a new life, that you want wild nature outside my door. And what's interesting, and I mean, I'm still trying to learn all of this stuff too, and I'm sure everybody that's listening wants to know is, you started getting these little hints, these little things, right, that were happening. How does it come, right? Or because I think a lot of times many of us are just oblivious, being so busy and being busy that we're not listening. So how did some of these things kind of come to you
Yeah.
so that you kind of, knew what does it mean to be drawn to that, particular peninsula? How did that look?
How did that happen? Yeah.
How did that happen? Right?
Yeah.
Because again, I think all of us, we have some yearning for something more, but we're not listening a lot of the time. Have been listening, and things have fallen in place perfectly.
I learned to listen. I wasn't listening at the time, but I have learned to listen and I'm still learning. But what happened is, I basically, as happens probably to a lot of your listeners, um, my whole life kind of fell away. That busyness got so extreme that it couldn't be sustainable anymore. And my life crashed down around me. I really lost everything. I went through a divorce after 20 years. And at the same time, I lost my health insurance. I lost my retirement savings. I lost, some of my ability to do work because I was left as a single mom. Lost a lot of my friends. Lost my identity as a wife and as a mother. So kind of all those things happened at the same time. And it really just, that's a kind of a rock bottom moment where it's like, I just lost all of this. I lost my future. I lost my future vision of who I was going to be, because you kind of plan that with your spouse and you kind of know where where you're headed together. But then when you don't have that anymore, you need to create a new future. I didn't even have a future that I knew that I wanted to look forward to. And in fact, it got to, I think a real turning point was one of my friends asked me, as I was going through this, what makes you happy? What is it that you enjoy doing? And I didn't have an answer for her because I didn't know myself outside of a wife, a mother, a daughter, a coordinator of all the sports events. I didn't know myself outside of that. And I literally didn't know who I was. And so in that, when you kind of, for me, that was rock bottom. And what I turned to instinctively, partly it wasn't a knowing. It was partly because I had become so scared of people. I just had so much anxiety around people. I didn't know who I was and I didn't know what they were thinking of me. And I was going through all this loss. And so I really felt very judged by a lot of people. And so I started to retreat. I started to retreat to nature. That was where I headed. So
Mm.
I didn't hear a call. I didn't choose that. To me, that was the safest escape route. So I would drive maybe 30 minutes before I could find a trail where I could walk my dogs and just be alone and just, try and figure out who I was. And that was the only time where my mind was quiet. I was with my dogs, and every single time I went out on a walk with my dogs where there were no people around, I found that I was happier. So that's how it started. And as I realized that I was happier every time I went out in nature, I started to do more of that. I started to look into it. I wanted to know, why am I happier in nature? I actually became very obsessed. I think one of the greatest things ever is that I lost my health insurance. And that sounds very scary. I know a lot of people around me were scared for me, but because I didn't have health insurance, I had to figure out ways to keep myself healthy and happy without prescriptions. And I think that is the best thing that ever happened to me, because I started paying attention to what made me feel good, and going out in nature made me feel good. But then I wanted to know why. Why does it make me feel good? And so I researched it. I actually became very obsessed about knowing how to prevent depression, recover from grief, slow the aging process. What natural things could I do to stay happier and healthier? And so that actually, without me planning it, those circumstances, that rock bottom moment, actually shifted the course of my life, because I tapped into something that dramatically changed me, that dramatically improved me. And along the way, and this is where the dogs come in, it did the same for my dogs. So as I was retreating to nature to feel happier and healthier, I noticed that my dogs were also getting a lot of the same benefit. So that is where that call to nature started. And then as I started spending more time in nature, it became easier to start to listen because I allowed nature to do its healing because I knew that it was happening. So then I allowed it to do more of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Well, and it's interesting, because I hadn't realized, or I didn't know about the healthcare issue, as well. And so if you again, I'm just stepping back, looking as an observer, right? Is that, you talked about, giving everything to your kids and your marriage and all the stuff that was going on. You'd kind of numbed yourself to yourself because you're
Hmm.
so busy doing all of that stuff.
Hmm.
There were some healthcare issues. You were taking some prescriptions. Those prescriptions were kind of numbing yourself probably as well, right? And so the thing is, you didn't realize, all of that stuff was going on, and that you were, kind of numbing yourself and detaching from yourself, and had been detached from nature until everything got pulled out from underneath you, and you were forced then to find a different way,
Right.
right? And it's then that coming back into nature, and I feel like that's a trend that's kind of going on,
Hmm.
because even though I live in a beautiful part of the country, I'm in a little postage stamp, lot in suburbia in the LA area, and we've got the ocean and other stuff. But I mean, I work from home. I do sit out in our back patio, but I'm not really in nature, right? Kind of like what you were talking about, as much of, starting to go for some hikes or spending some more time outside and trying to actually reconnect with nature itself.
So that's an important point, though, because I don't want people to think that they have to move out to the wilderness like I did in order to be around nature, because that's not actually what needs to happen. It's not for everybody. What I ended up doing, I ended up moving, we didn't mention this, but I ended up moving like 9 hours away from my friends and family in my former life. And I knew nobody where I live now. I still don't know that many people. Um, it's very remote, very rural. That's not for everybody. And I'm very aware of that. I love it. I was here for it. I was like, I want to see what this life is like. And it actually turns out that I really love it. But there is nature everywhere. We are nature. The bromelia that you have behind you is nature. The air that you're breathing is nature. The birds that you can see are nature. We just need to be conscious of that and reconnect to it in any way that we can, because there is such healing in all of it, in whatever way you can find it. Even if you just, need to bring a house plant into your house, that is nature. The soil has healing, um, I'm going to call them essential oils, but like healing probiotics and essential oils just in dirt
Mhm.
that you can smell, and it will release, it will trigger like happy hormones and, improve your mood. Even that is nature. So water is
Mhm.
nature in any way that you can have it, even if it's drawing a bath and just being very intentional about saying, I'm connecting to water, and whatever comes through, just seeing, do I feel better after I take a bath, after I've connected to water? Um, just being intentional about connecting to those elements and then seeing what happens, recognizing how you feel before and after. And then if it's a good thing, if it's a positive thing, doing more of that. And again, being intentional about connecting to more of that. So I know not everybody can move to the wilderness.
Well, and right now I can't, but it's funny because it brings up I do like nature. I mean, I like going out camping and hiking, and there's been certain times in my life when I've done more of that, right? In fact, up here on my one of my vision boards, I've got a picture of me, out hiking to remind me to get my butt out there into nature and do that again. And I remember, it was a few months ago, because like I said, I mean, the LA area, there's 20 or 25 million people here, right? I mean, you can drive for 50 or 60 miles, right? And I know for you, it's like, oh my gosh, right? And it's like, I can drive, depending on which way you go, you can drive for 100 miles and you're going to continue to see people and buildings and everything else. And so I kind of had this feel this one time, like I gotta get back out. I mean, I'm not in the physical shape that I was 3 or 4 years ago. I couldn't go out and hike 12, 15 miles in 10,000 foot elevation right now, right? So I thought, well, we've got mountains very close to us here, an hour and a half. I can be out in the mountains here outside of LA. So I get up, again with the intention of, okay, I'm just going to go for a drive this day. I'm going to drive up into the hills and I'm just going to be in nature. Okay. So I start driving up, and of course there's only a couple of places here in LA where you can get up into the hills. So I go to the first one that's closer, where I kind of had the intention or thought of where I was going to go. And I start to drive up the canyon, and there's police, and they blocked off the canyon for some reason. So there must have been some accident or who knows what. So they blocked it off. So I'm like, shit. Okay. So I come back down the hill a little bit. I drive along the foothills, go to the next place where I can really kind of drive up into the hills. Right. So I start driving up. I'm trying to kind of follow my intuition. Oh, here's a great vista area. This is going to be perfect. I pull off. There's like one car that's there already. And so I get off and I kind of go sit on the side of the hill. The people go get in their car and they start to leave. And I'm like, yes, this is fabulous, right? I can see for miles. And literally it was like a minute later, all of a sudden the ground starts shaking.
Oh my gosh.
And a whole motorcycle gang, like
I thought it was an earthquake.
No, I called it like it was like an Asian motorcycle gang, right? They were out for a Sunday drive. There were probably 50 of them.
Oh my gosh.
That drive up and park right on that vista where I'm at. And then they're all, they were doing some sort of celebration, I think, for somebody who'd passed away, because they were taking pictures, with a picture of somebody. And fine, but it's just kind of, so I was like, shit, right? So I get back in my car, I'm driving around trying to find another good place. I don't really I go off. I find this place that looks like maybe there's going to be a little bit of a trail, so I'm gonna go in there and just kind of sit with myself. And I get in there and I sit down. It's still close enough to the road every so often, right? And it's like, okay, well, I can just kind of clear this out, and I'll be fine. I'll just focus on it. And then, of course, a carload of teenage girls gets there, and I'm in this little canyon area, and they start right, and it's echoing everywhere. And so finally, I'm like, "Fuck it!" I get in my car, I drive back home. It's more peaceful at my home,
right? Nature sucks.
than it was out in nature, right?
Right.
But to me, it was kind of the right of just what you just said, nature.
Yeah. It's all around.
It's all around. And actually sitting in my back patio, looking at the vegetation in my garden, is much more connecting. There's much more peace and quiet, right? Even though I live in a subdivision, it's actually a very quiet place. We never hear the neighbors. The freeway's a couple a mile and a half away. Sometimes we can kind of hear the of that, but for the most part, I think, like you said, for everybody listening, right, it's more about just connecting with what you have available to you, right?
Recognizing it.
The plants, the dirt, the other things that are literally right around us. We don't have to go to the mountains. We don't have to drive to northern Michigan to be able to be in nature.
Right.
And maybe talk a little bit more, because I heard you say we've got to be intentional about connecting. So what does that look like, or what is it for people that aren't familiar with what that?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that, because that kind of popped up into my head too as you mention something. When I was at my lowest, and when I was, having severe anxiety and depression, and I was escaping to nature, one of the only things somehow I got the idea, or I heard it somewhere, that gratitude is a good way to feel better, to ease depression, to ease anxiety. And so what I did was, as I was out walking, I was looking for things to feel grateful for. And it just so happened that a sunbeam, like the clouds parted one day, and a sunbeam hit my face, and I could actually feel the warmth of it on my skin. And it felt so good. And it just, I was lost in my sad victim story thoughts. But the sunbeam actually kind of broke me out of it. And I was like, oh, that feels so good. I actually felt like I was being touched by the sun. Now, this wasn't a mystical experience or anything. This was literally just the sun hitting my face. But I think I was so rock bottom at that point, and it just felt so good that it snapped me out of something. And for a moment, I felt such gratitude for that sun touching my face. And I wanted more of that. I wanted to be touched by the sun again, if that makes sense. And so I became very intentional about any time that the sun came out and I felt the sun on my skin, I just took a moment and I was just thankful for it. I was just grateful. Thank you, sun. Like, I feel you. I see you. I recognize you. And, I'm receiving you. And then it became, I think one day I was walking in one of my favorite spots, and I kind of got to the top of this hill, and I was standing there again in my victim stories, and I got hit by a blast of wind that actually felt again like I was being touched by the wind. It was just such a strong gust of wind. It caught my attention. That's what it was. It wasn't a mystical experience or anything. It just snapped me out of my thoughts. And as I felt it and I recognized it, and I realized that that felt good, I wanted more of that, then I was grateful for it. And so I kind of started this practice of being grateful for those two things, the sun on my skin and the wind, feeling the wind on my skin. And it grew from there because those actually were very transformative practices. And the more I did it, the more I found, the more things that I found I could be grateful for, the better I felt. It just gave me moments where I was out of my victim story. I was out of my sadness, and I was feeling grateful. And so it just grew from there. Um, and that's kind of how in the end, I really ended up starting from just that basic practice, I ended up developing a whole rewilding practice. I mean, now the connection that I have to the earth is beyond what I could even explain in this podcast. Maybe we'll do another one about, connecting to the earth
We'll
and
go a little deeper
rewilding.
probably in the future. We got to ease people
Yeah.
into this a little
Yeah.
bit,
Yeah.
because yeah, all of you listening, you don't know what Jennifer can do yet, and we'll probably get there at some point in the future, but we won't tell you about it right now. But so you use the term rewilding, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which again is probably a term that people haven't heard about. What do you mean by
Mm-hmm.
that?
So
Rewilding.
rewilding. So there are different concepts of rewilding, but one involves like bringing animals back to their natural habitat. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is humans reconnecting to the earth, to the cycles of the season, to the cycles of the day, to the sun, to the water, to the gratitude for the garden that you have, to giving gratitude for those plants that are growing and nourishing you, to knowing where your food comes from. We just within a few decades, really, a couple generations, have become so disconnected to the earth that we don't know where our food comes from. We don't consciously give thanks to we don't even recognize the nature around us, and we don't make it a practice to be connected to the earth. And again, I didn't know these things as they were starting to happen, but I became so obsessed with wanting to know why things were happening to me that I then did the research after these experiences started happening. So that's how I, have come to learn about rewilding. And I just know from my own self that as I now live more in the wilderness, my body is more attuned to the cycles of nature. I literally am watching the flowers grow every day, and I'm understanding, like, as they're poking through the earth, in the early spring, and they're growing, and then they're changing throughout the season, throughout the summer, and then now as they're dying away in the fall, and then, what happens in the winter. That cycle that the earth is going through is also a cycle that my body starts to go through. New things start happening in the spring for me. Summer is a season of, like busy, busy activity. Fall starts to be a slowing down and a letting go. And then winter is a period of hibernation and kind of deep reflection. I am now more connected to the earth and to the cycle that for the entire history of humankind, the cycles that we have gone through. It's only been in the last couple generations where we've
Mhm.
lost that, where we stay up all night on our computers, where we're, bathed in blue light, where there's just no stop. There's no rest period. There's no fall. There's no winter because nothing ever stops.
Well,
So
yeah, and it's interesting because one of the greatest inventions was the incandescent light bulb, but that's probably also one of the most
yeah,
destructive in some ways as well, right? Because for millions or billions of years, we slow down and we go to sleep when it's dark because we can't see anything, right? And unless we're carrying
right.
around a torch or fire with us, we can't see anything. So it would force us to kind of go to sleep, right? And to be active during the day when there was daylight. Now, when you can just flip a switch, right? Everybody's circadian rhythms end up getting really screwed up. They have trouble sleeping, all this stuff because,
Yeah.
like you said, we're kind of detached from nature. And what's interesting too, because as you were talking about like where our food comes from, right? I mean, I grew up on a farm. We had my dad was a gentleman farmer, right? So he had a construction company, but we had, some acreage that we would actually grow some things and raise some animals and things like that too. So I have the benefit of being kind of connected with that. And I was raised religious, right? So we'd always pray
Mhm.
as a family before we would eat.
Mhm.
And usually, the prayer was mainly, we're grateful for this bounty that's been provided to us, blah, 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 whatever kind of thing, right? But a lot of the prayer or saying grace over food is about expressing the gratitude for that, right? And so as I kind of left, religious experience, kind of thought, well, prayer like that's just bullshit, right? But now as I'm trying to rewild myself, right, and starting to think about and expressing the gratitude for, where did that come from, right? Because we used to
Mhm.
always joke. One of my uncles moved back east when he was young, and so when he'd come out with his east coast wife, we couldn't say certain things, right? Like, no, they thought milk came from the grocery store. Well, we had cows, right? And so we would milk the cows. And so there was like this whole foreign thing, like, I'm not drinking milk from a cow, I'm drinking milk from the store, right? Like, where the
Right.
fuck do you think it came from anyway? But anyway, right? But so that's kind of what you're talking about too, with the gratitude in general of just even starting
Mhm.
to think about and reconnect with, the food that we're eating, the water that we're drinking, what we're bathing ourselves with, looking at the plants growing and the other things like that as well, and allowing ourselves to get back more into the rhythm of nature. Because like you said, we're
Yeah,
nature too. So if we're trying to fight our normal natural tendencies, then that's probably
exactly.
does bad things for our body as well. And I'm guessing,
Exactly.
like
And
you
that's
said, I mean,
where,
yeah.
well, I was going to say, that's where the anxiety is just taking such a deep hold in us, and the depression, and just all the mental health issues that we're having. I believe a lot of it is this disconnect to nature and to who we truly are as nature.
Mhm.
And I just have had nothing but positive experiences as I've reconnected, as my dogs have reconnected. I mean, there was an interesting, I think the World Health Organization um, put out recently that we are now more urban. We're a more urban species than we are rural. So more people in the world live in urban spaces than they do in rural spaces. And that's a shift, that obviously has happened in humanity because it wasn't always like that. And because I work with dogs, my first thought was, so we have now moved to the city more than ever before, but our dogs have had to come with us. Like they had no choice but to come with us. So our dogs are now living in high rises, and they get down and they touch, their paws on the ground, maybe 2 or 3 times a day when they, go down in their elevators, or maybe they're just, in a neighborhood and hanging out on couches all day until their, parents get home and they take them for the obligatory walk around the neighborhood. So not only have we disconnected from nature, sorry, but the animals that live with us have too. And we're seeing skyrocketing rates of anxiety, aggressiveness, destructive behavior in dogs as well. So there's such benefit all around to connecting to nature. But I don't think that I think right now, the way things are in society right now, I think even vets are still just writing a prescription. If your dog has anxiety, here's a pill. We're not conscious yet of the disconnect that we've created and the power of reconnecting to nature. That we've disconnected ourselves from our mother, basically, our Mother Earth. Mm-hmm. She provided everything for us historically, and we've disconnected from that. We've disconnected from even the idea of it, and certainly the gratitude of it, the cycles of it, the rhythms of it, the negative ions of it. I mean, she has powerful energy that wild animals use to heal, and that we used to use to heal. We've just disconnected from all of that, and it's taking a toll, but I don't think we quite understand it yet. I don't think that we as a society are seeing that it's this disconnect from nature that is creating all the mental health and anger and sadness and victim mentality that we've got going on in the world.
Well, yeah, and like you said, it's interesting because I mean humans have been domesticated and urbanized for a long time, right? I mean, we've been slowly moving since the Industrial Revolution, more and more people going to the cities. But like you said, we have kind of crossed over that point where now there's more people in the urban areas than in the rural areas, which probably does some counterbalancing in the energy on the earth anyway. But as humans, our healthcare and everything else, right now we just take pills for everything, when some of the things in nature can actually heal us without needing to take the pharmacology, right? And so I know right. in your life, you said when you lost healthcare, you had to kind of quit taking some of the prescriptions because some of those things are pretty damn expensive, right? And so right. it kind of forced you to find some other natural way of doing it. And again, I'm guessing I'm throwing it out there, but do you feel better now being more connected to nature than you did when you were on all the pharmacology?
I feel amazing. I feel younger. I feel younger now than I did 10 years ago, probably. I have more energy. My mind is clear. Grief, if grief happens, grief happens. Grief is not a mental health issue. I know how to work my way through it. I know the things that will help me, bounce back. Depression, not an issue. Anxiety, I used to have such severe anxiety attacks when I was around people. I just don't experience any of that anymore. But I know now where my medicine comes from. Mm-hmm. It's not from a prescription pad. If I needed, I'm not saying that nobody should go to the doctor. If I needed medical help, I would get that first, but I haven't needed medical assistance in the last 7 years because I know where my medicine has, come from. I know where to turn.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's, because you made reference to the effect on your dog. And so let's start talking about dogs too, because I know this is a big passion.
Yeah, we ended up talking about nature, but
but dogs are nature too, right? And I think
Yeah.
to me, again, this is what's one of the I've just heard anecdotally, so I don't have the science or data to back it up, but you might, right? Because you know a lot about dogs, but especially with, like you said, more of us moving urban, and especially with the pandemic and more people working from home, us
Mhm.
being locked away for that period of time when we were really isolated, a lot of people got dogs, right? A lot of
Yes.
people got dogs. Our son-in-law and daughter-in-law, or son and daughter-in-law, they got a dog, right, during that time. And so let's now we're starting to incorporate, whether you realize it or not, having a dog, having a cat, having, some sort of a pet or animal in the house is also nature, right? And
It is,
so,
and it's a powerful healing too. Dogs are a very healing presence too. But yeah, a lot of people, more people than ever got dogs during the pandemic. But unfortunately, because what those dogs are experiencing, a lot of them, is a lack of socialization because people brought dogs into their house, but then they weren't allowed to take dogs out for kind of the normal experiences, the normal socialization experiences that most puppies and dogs would experience. So they didn't get to go to the dog park. They didn't get to go even to the vet in a normal way. Most people had to just kind of leave their vet, or sorry, walk their dog to the door, and then the vet took them from there. Um, so a lot of people got dogs, but there are a lot of issues with those dogs. And if you got a pandemic dog, know that you're not alone. If it went great, that's wonderful. But if you are struggling with your dog's behavior, anxiety, lack of socialization, you're definitely not alone, because this is a huge trend that we're seeing, in the pet industry now, is that people are really struggling with the behavior of their dogs, and a lot of it is because of that lack of socialization, that lack of access to just getting outside,
hmm,
spending so much time inside, and not being able to access trainers, not being able to access each other, and say, hey, what's going on with my dog? And also, I mean, I think really the key thing is the increased anxiety in ourselves, the increased depression in ourselves. Our dogs pick up on that. And so through the pandemic, when we were, anxious and nervous and fearful about everything going on, and dealing with, just depression and isolation, we were pumping out hormones that corresponded to that. And our dogs were picking it up because they can sense minute chemical changes in our bodies. Think about, tracking dogs and the things that they can smell. They can smell. Think about a seizure sensing dog who, acts as a service dog and can, tell a person of an impending seizure or an impending diabetic um, episode. That's the level of scent that a dog has. And when we're sitting here pumping out anxiety and, stress hormones, they're picking up on that. So it's been a complicated issue because a lot of people got dogs, but for the dogs that, were brought into the homes, there's been a lot of negative repercussions of this pandemic period. And what I noticed with my own dogs, when I went through this kind of, this rock bottom that I was talking about, when I fell on my face, that's what I called it, like literally couldn't even complete a sentence or, think a thought, because I was just so deep in the depression. What I noticed during that time period was that my dogs, I had 3 dogs at the time, they all got sick too. So when I was at my lowest, all of a sudden, all 3 of my dogs were at their lowest. Every one of them got sick. I actually started to say goodbye to one of them. And as I started to try and figure out things that made me feel better, I mean, I was kind of, like I said, I was desperate to feel better, and I started, researching things. What I noticed is that as I felt better, my dogs started to feel better too. So as I healed, my dogs healed. And again, I didn't know that going into it, but I noticed it. And then I wanted to research it and find out, what had happened. And that what I just talked about with the energy that we're putting out and the hormones that we're putting out, that's what I discovered is that our dogs are mirrors of ourselves. So if we are putting out depression, stress, anxiety, sadness, chances are your dog might be mirroring some of that back to you. So I heard somebody talk yesterday or a couple of days ago about, she was talking about how controlling she was of her life. And she knew she wanted to change, but she was like, I'm very dominant in my life. She didn't use the word dominant. She's very controlling. She wanted everything to go a specific way. And then her dog started barking. And she said, oh, and my dog, she's so dominant. I really have to take her to the trainer and get that fixed. And I thought, oh, right there. She's putting out this controlling energy. She had just adopted this dog who became very dominant. It's a controlling energy that she was mirroring back to her. And so often, a lot of the issues that our dogs are having, if we could sit and look at the issues that we're having, it could be a 2-for-1 fix. If your dog is mirroring back to you the issue that you're dealing with.
Well, what's interesting, because I'm sitting here thinking of it, and it's almost like dogs are kind of like the canary in the coal mine a little bit too, right? Is that because I know we were dog sitting for somebody a few weeks ago. And what's interesting, I mean, you know me, I'm kind of a chill, laid back, calm kind of person, right? And so the parents of this dog are a lot more anxious, a lot more, kind of thing. So the little dog is like anxious, the most anxious dog I have ever seen in my life. I
Yeah.
have not seen a dog scared of everything like I do in this particular dog. And what's interesting, so I drop them off. We watch them for, her for, I don't know, 3-4 days. The whole time that she's here, she's just lounging
Yeah.
around, having it, just laying out, just chilling. The minute that the parents come back and walk through the door, the dog changes again and
Yep.
goes right back to doing
Yeah.
what she was doing before. And so it's interesting that again, if you have a pet, you can probably, like you said, it's the same thing with our human behavior as well. When I'm coaching people on leadership and stuff, I use that mirror example too, right? Like if somebody's being an asshole, hold up the mirror. What are you doing to be the asshole
Right.
that's mirroring off
Right.
of them, right? And so it's the same kind of
Mhm.
thing. If your dogs are getting sick, are we getting sick? But like you said, as you got healthy, your dogs got healthy as well. So we can kind of use them to almost like see what's going on with us. But
Mhm.
there is a healing that happens by having the animals as well, right?
Absolutely. Even if they're anxious, even if they lack socialization, there's still such a healing, no matter what's going on. And I don't want anybody to feel bad, like, oh my God, my dog is anxious and I'm anxious too. This is my fault. It's
Yeah,
not your
because no, no,
fault.
no, no, yeah.
It's just no. And but it's an opportunity to, look at your dog and say, well, what are the issues that my dog is having? And maybe that's something that I need to address too. But even in that, no matter what, there's such healing presences. I really feel like, again, going back to my lowest point, um, I really, through the divorce, my ex-husband had actually like purposely tried to make me feel unlovable. Like he wanted to make me feel not good enough because it made him feel better about himself. And it had worked. It wasn't something that I knew he was doing, but he'd been doing it for years. And so I came out of the divorce feeling very unlovable. Like that was just my identity, was that I was an unlovable person. And there was a day where I came home and all 3 dogs were just like dancing at the door. They were so excited to see me. They literally did this every single day. I mean, they could do it if I went to the bathroom and came back. They'd be so excited to see me. But there was this one moment where I recognized what was happening. And I was like, my dogs are dancing with excitement to see me. They love me. And that means that I am actually lovable. I am lovable. My dogs shifted that in me. I mean, what a gift to be shown that the belief was incorrect, that I am lovable. That's such a healing power. And they could have been sick. They could have been dealing with all sorts of things while they were still doing it, but they still offered that healing to me. So I actually, I told you that I was obsessed about like figuring out how to heal, how to be healthier and happier. In that moment, I became obsessed about also figuring out how to make my dogs happier and healthier. So that kind of, from that moment on, it like shifted the course of my life. I became obsessed with how I can be happier and healthier, and then how I can do the same for my dogs in return, because I saw what they were giving back to me. And I realized that for everything that they've given to me, I wanted to do the same for them. If I wanted to be happier and healthier, I wanted to do the same for them. And it's just been this amazing cycle, or like circle kind of healing. As I healed, they healed. As they healed, I healed. And it just, as I do things for them and I see the results that they have and they get better, it makes me feel better. And so it's just been a wonderful thing to tune into, because there are moments when, they do have something happens, with maybe they're not as healthy one day as they were the day before. And I sit and I look at that first and foremost and say, okay, what's going on around the house? Is there anything energetically? Where's my mood? Like I start with that first, because I know that my energy, my emotions, my hormones, um, could be the thing that needs to be adjusted. And so I look at that first, and then if not, then obviously take them to the vet, get medical help, do whatever you need to do. But it's an important factor that, again, I don't think a lot of us are tapping into.
No, and I think it's beautiful. It's that symbiotic and, like you said, cycle of healing. Again,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's a dog, cat, garden, plants, whatever it happens
Yes,
to be, that there really is this cycle of healing. As we care for the plant cares for us, right? We expel
absolutely.
carbon dioxide, they need that. They expel oxygen, we need that, right? So there's this
Mm-hmm.
constant cycle, of back and forth. They need us, but we need them as well, right? And when we start to
Exactly.
recognize that and we start to honor that, it's a beautiful, beautiful thing, right?
Because we are
um
the same. We are nature,
yeah,
you know.
we are nature.
We are no different than the plants and the animals.
Well, and so I know you've got, I know you kind of have already written like an ebook, and you're looking at doing something that's a little bit bigger from a book perspective too. But for some of the people that are listening too, I mean, they probably have been able to read in between the lines. But as we kind of wrap up, for today, would love to leave people with, one or two ideas of, something that they can practically do to help them connect more either with their dog or with nature in general. Um, so what would you
Yeah.
tell people?
So two ideas that come to mind. So the ebook that I wrote is literally explaining exactly that. So if anybody is interested and wants to check that out, we'll leave information on that. But two of the easiest places to start, I think, are, one is mindfulness.
Mhm.
So what I started doing was being more mindful around my dogs, not meditating, but just being mindful of them. So a mindfulness walk is a great start. So as you're walking your dog, just be mindful of your dog, not of everything else that's going around, not of your phone, not of even how you feel. Just be mindful of your dog and watch your dog's behavior. Watch when they want to stop and smell something. Let go of the idea that you have to hit a certain time limit, or you have to, reach a certain distance. Let go of that. See where your dog wants to go, and just be present with your dog, and just be open to kind of observing your dog in a way that you maybe have never observed them before, and seeing what happens, seeing what comes up, seeing what you what ahas happen, and taking note of those, recognizing them. And then that might lead you down a path of wanting to observe more and understand more, because you might see some behaviors in your dog that you never noticed before because you weren't being mindful of them, because we had this preconceived notion of what a dog walk should be. So a mindfulness walk is a great place to start. I also would recommend, let's do it. I'm going to recommend earthing, or grounding, which is, I said before that wild animals don't need prescriptions. Wild animals don't, suffer from anxiety like our dogs do. Wolves aren't running around with anxiety and, depression, and they're not needing pills from their vets. They're in touch with negative ions that come through the earth, which provide our bodies, all of our bodies, animal bodies, all animal bodies, including ours, with a balance of energy. And we are lacking that, but our dogs are lacking that too. So your dog actually needs to be touching the ground for at least 30 minutes a day, preferably more if you can. Paw pads on the ground. Concrete can work if there's nothing underneath it, but ideally grass, dirt,
Yep.
rocks. Let them have that contact with the ground that they used to have, that we all used to have, to bring their bodies energetically back into balance and allow their bodies a better chance to heal themselves, basically, from whatever's going on.
Yeah, and that might be, grounding or earthing might be a new term that people haven't heard of. So maybe I should do an episode on this in the future, because
Yeah.
it's a really interesting concept. Is that, just like Jennifer was talking about, right? I mean, there's energy. You can call it electricity, energy, ions, whatever, but there is energy in everything around us, right? And for millions or billions of years, we all walked around pretty much barefoot. So for or very little, right? And so for the most part, the energy could pass through, and it can pass through what I call natural materials, right? So obviously, if you're barefoot, if you're wearing cotton socks, the energy can still go through that. Now, the problem is most of us wear plastic shoes. Now,
Right.
if you're familiar with electricity and electricity in your house, there's a reason why they wrap the wires in plastic, because the electricity can't go through the plastic. But if you look down at what you're wearing on your feet all day, it's plastic, right? So that's why when people talk about hugging a tree or sitting on the grass or, gardening and just actually, having your fingers in the dirt, right? Those are opportunities for us as humans, just like your dogs, to be able to actually ground and allow some of that energy to flow back and forth from our bodies to the earth, from the earth to us as well. That ends up, kind of helping us out. There's plenty of stuff online
Yep.
about it. Some of it's kind of hokey and BS, but there's actual science behind a lot of this stuff as well.
There is science behind it, yeah. And it's a very simple practice too. It's literally just, it's touching the earth.
Yeah.
And, for 30 minutes if you can, more if you can make it. But even, just even putting toes in the water, it's just a simple practice that will create a better energy flow in your body and in your dog's body. And it's really essential for all of our bodies to have that. So it's a very simple practice, but there's definitely science behind it. There's more you can go into it. But just, taking that time to make sure that your dogs have paws on the ground, for as much time as they can a day.
Well, like you said, 30 minutes, probably a good ballpark.
It's a good place to start. Great place to start. Yeah.
Good place to start. But anything is better.
Because we all, exactly. I love that idea that baby steps, nothing that I ever did in this whole journey was perfect, but I just took tiny little baby steps and I just kept adding on, and in the times where I thought that I did have to be perfect with it, I held myself back for months and years. Dog food is a good example. That's a whole nother episode, but I held myself back from even taking the tiniest step, but even the tiniest step always made an improvement. So that's where I live from now is, baby steps, just as much as you can do, and don't need to be an expert, don't need to be perfect at it. But even if you can, get your dog outside for a little bit more and you go with them, you probably
It's
both
a
will be
win-win,
better off
right?
for
You
it.
get the 30-minute walk, they get the
Win-win.
30-minute walk as
Yep.
well, right? So yeah.
Yep.
Well,
Healing all around.
this has been great, Jennifer. And I know, you made reference, and we'll make sure and add in the show notes that I think you call it the 5 ways to make your dog healthier and happier. So people
Yep.
can find that. How's the best place for people to reach out to you? I know we'll put the exact in the show notes, but if people are like, man, because I will tell you, everybody who's listening, Jennifer knows about dogs. She knows more about dogs than anybody that I know, right? And so if you're interested, you got lots of stuff out there too. But how's the best place for people to reach out to you?
Thank you. Yeah, it's at dogkind.com. It's like humankind, but dogkind. That's what we're all about. And on Facebook and Instagram, I'm at I am dogkind.
I am. All right. Got it. So we can put it in the notes there. But thank you, my friend, for coming on.
Thank
There's
you.
lots of other stuff that we can be talking about too, but
I feel like we could talk for days. Yeah.
oh yeah, we can talk for days.
I know we can talk for days, actually.
Yeah, I literally know we can.
Yeah.
Any final things that you want to leave with people before we sign off for the day?
No, I just, again, just any little step that you can take and to get out in nature or to see your dog mindfully or to recognize that energy that's flowing between the two of you, I think will be a step toward making a better life for both of you because they're just we're so intricately intertwined with our dogs, in a way that no other animal does with us. So, any little step can be a great step in the right direction.
Perfect. Well, thank you. And I'm sure, like I said,
Thank you.
we've got lots of other stuff to talk about. So I'm sure we'll have you back as well.
Sounds
So
good.
everybody go out this week, do what you can to, just start trying to connect a little bit more to nature. Any little step will make a difference. And, again, not everybody's the same. Some people are drawn to dogs. Some people are drawn to cats. Some people are drawn to gardening. Some people are drawn to whatever, right? Swimming. But just start trying some little things and see, just like Jennifer did in her example, right? Hey, this actually makes me feel good. I'm going to do a little more of that, right? So find those things that make you feel a little bit better and just start doing a little bit more of those and just keep feeling better and better and better and better.